morning, Canvas Church. Man, great to have all of you here today. What an incredible crowd on Super Bowl Sunday. I'm impressed, very, very impressed. Now, it might be because none of you have a dog in the fight. Totally acceptable, sort of. I get it. As you can see, I'm rooting for the Seahawks. Go Hawks. Unless you think I'm a bandwagon fan, I'm going to take you back to 1992. I had a jersey similar to this, only it was a jersey of the day. It was an all-white one. I would also rock it with a hooded sweatshirt when I'd go down to the middle school and pick up my girlfriend, Heidi. We can talk more about that story later. I thought it looked great. It was only after we got married that I found out she hated it and she was embarrassed every time I showed up at her school. And then, you won't believe this. Shortly after we got married, she found a garbage can for the jersey. I know. I'm not bitter, I promise. But I can only imagine what that jersey might be worth these days. We'll never know. I am excited for the game today. I think it's going to be a great retribution to the last time we met the Patriots in the Super Bowl. But anyhow, enough of that. If you're a guest, welcome. So glad that you're here today. Man, we're pumped that you decided to carve out some time and spend it here with us at Canvas Church. So thanks so much for being here. My name's Nate. I get to serve on the team at Canvas Church, and the team is made up of so many fabulous people serving all around the building, out in the parking lot. And would you do me a favor and give our worship team a hand this morning? Tell them thank you. Really pumped at the way that they're stepping in and filling in this transition time. Just love the atmosphere of worship they're bringing to us Sunday after Sunday. So really grateful for them. Also, before we jump to today's message, I want to announce we have Baptism Sunday coming on March 8th. Sunday, March 8th. Mark that on your calendar. And here's a couple reasons why you want to mark it on your calendar. One, if you've been baptized, you want to be here because we celebrate like nobody's business when people get baptized. When we're celebrating people who are transitioning from death to life, it is an opportunity to celebrate. So make sure you come out and celebrate with us. If you're here and you're a follower of Jesus and you have not yet followed him in baptism, I want to encourage you to get signed up. You can do that in your bulletin, scan the QR code, and get baptized. It's a public declaration of an inward faith. It is something that Jesus did himself, and then he told us to do. Therefore, because God has given me all authority, this is Jesus' words as he's leaving this earth. He says, therefore, Go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them all that I have commanded. So we follow Jesus's, not only his actions, but we follow his commands when we get baptized. So if you haven't been baptized, we would love to celebrate with you on Sunday, March 8th at Baptism Sunday. Now this morning, we're jumping into part 5 of our Ruth series, Ruth, a story of hope. I hope that you've been along on the journey with us. If you haven't or you've missed something along the way, no worries. You can get it on demand, podcast, YouTube, Facebook. It's available in all of those places. I encourage you to go back and catch yourself up. But this morning, we're in part 5, and the title of today's message is Redeemer. Redeemer. Now, I got a question as we get things kicked off here today. I want you to think about a time when you felt the relief of a light at the end of the tunnel. That moment where you realize all of a sudden everything has shifted. All of a sudden there's a glimmer of hope. You can finally maybe catch your breath. Like, I don't know what the season looked like for you when you finally felt the light at the end of the tunnel, but my guess is every one of us has a story. We have something we can point to and say, there was this moment. Now, that turn of phrase, it was born out of a literal experience long before it became a metaphor for hope after prolonged hardship. It literally happened. Like, This phrase came about in the 18th and 19th centuries where workers were building canals and they were working in the mines and they were building railroads and tunneling their way through mountains. And often they would work long stretches in the dark, just long stretches with no light, working by way of artificial light and trying to accomplish a task or trying to accomplish a goal. And then there always would come a moment where light would begin to shine through, where they realized not only were they almost finished with the task at hand, but they were also almost out of danger's way. You could imagine what it would have been like in the 18th and 19th century, building waterways, building, like digging in mines and tunneling your way through mountains for railroads. And can you imagine that moment where all of a sudden, even the smallest glimmer of hope began to shine through? Now, this is a really poor example because I was in no way, shape, or form in danger. In fact, I had subjected myself to this journey like willingly. Anybody been on the Hiawatha Trail before? Yes. And we have artificial headlamps and all that, but that first tunnel's no joke, right? That thing's like 1.5 miles long. And you don't realize that 1.5 miles is a long way until you're like in the middle of the tunnel and the temperatures drop 20 degrees and you keep pedaling and pedaling and pedaling. And you think to yourself, at some point, there has to be an end to this tunnel. And then you see it. It's a long ways off, but you see just this little glimmer of light, this little glimmer of hope that you're going to, if you keep moving, you're going to be out of this tunnel soon enough. As I already said, if given enough opportunity, we could go around the room and we could all share our stories or our moments of the light at the end of the tunnel experience. In fact, for those of you who are in Canvas groups, I hope that you do share some of your stories in your groups this week as you gather together and dialogue about what's monologued this morning. So we all have these moments. Everyone who has been in a long, dark, hard season, you know the difference between wanting hope and actually seeing hope. They're radically different. This, in the midst of the hardship, in the midst of the trial, there's this deep desire to have hope. And then all of a sudden there's a moment where there's a glimmer of hope and you can actually see it for what it is. You can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, as you know, the light at the end of the tunnel does not mean that you're out of the tunnel yet. In fact, when you experience the light at the end of the tunnel, you are still, in fact, in the tunnel. You're still in it. Like you haven't come through it yet. You're still in the midst of it. But it does mean this. It does mean that darkness does not get the final word. That there is finally hope on the horizon. There's something to aim at. There's something to fix your eyes on. For me, the darkness of the night has always been a strange enemy of mine. When I'm going through a season where my mind's filled with a lot of stuff, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and my mind just starts rolling. Anybody else similarly wired? And my mind just gets rolling. And this is what I tell myself in the middle of it. Listen, just make it to morning. Just get to the morning and everything's going to be okay. In fact, sometimes I have to get up, I start to read, and I crack open the blinds. And I crack open the blinds because I want to see the first glimmer of sunlight on the horizon. Once I see that, it's amazing how my mind can rest and my body can then rest as well. Why? Because there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Darkness is not going to get the final word. Morning is on its way. Our text today, it marks a turning point for one of the main characters in the story. It marks the turning point for Naomi. This is a moment where her outlook begins to change, it begins to shift, not because all of a sudden, suddenly everything is better, but because she recognizes something she had not seen before. And this recognition of something she hasn't seen before can be summarized in this simple statement: rescue comes from a redeemer, or rescue comes through a redeemer. By the time we're done here this morning, I hope that you have a good understanding, a good foundation, an anchor point for what this means, that rescue comes through a redeemer. And this is why that's my hope. Is because just like Naomi, each of us needs a redeemer as well. Each of us needs to be rescued. Each of us needs to recognize the hope that comes through the redeemer, not through what we can accomplish on our own. So my prayer is the same reality that Naomi had would also be a reality for you and I. It would be a turning point for us as well, no matter where we're at in the season of life, that we would have something to fix our eyes on that will help us walk through any season we come to in this life. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and open to Ruth chapter 2. We're going to be in verses 19 through 23, so we're closing out the end of chapter 2 this morning. And as you're turning there, let me just remind you, Ruth had been out in the field of a guy named Boaz, who was like amazingly, incredibly generous to her and incredibly kind to her. She had just gone out looking for some kindness, that somebody would allow her to like gather grain that had been dropped or left behind by the harvesters. And she landed in Boaz's field, and we've recognized that she didn't just do that by happenstance. It was by the providence of God, that God was working behind the scenes even when he seemed absent in the story, that he was there and he was working things out the way they needed to get worked out. And she ends up walking away with an amazing haul of grain. Enough grain to last her and Naomi for over a couple of weeks. And this is what happens. She goes home. She shows Naomi all of the grain she gathered. She shares some roasted grain that she had received from Boaz. And then this is what happens after that. Verse 19. "Where did you gather all this grain today?" Naomi asks. "Where did you work? May the Lord bless the one who helped you." So Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man in whose field she had worked. She said, "The man I worked with today is named Boaz." "May the Lord bless him," Naomi told her daughter-in-law. "He is showing his kindness to us as well as to your dead husband. That man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers." Then Ruth said, "What's more, Boaz even told me to come back and stay with his harvesters until the entire harvest is completed." "Good," Naomi exclaimed. "Do as he said, my daughter. Stay with his young women, right through the whole harvest. You might be harassed in the other fields, but you'll be safe with him." So Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's field and gathered grain with them until the end of the barley harvest, and then the wheat harvest in early summer. And all the while, she lived with her mother-in-law. See, Naomi, she had spent this last season of her life marked by loss, marked by bitterness, marked by what seemed like, in fact, in her words herself, judgment from God himself. This was the plea that she gave to her daughters-in-law when they left Moab and started headed back to her homeland in Jerusalem. She stops along the way and she tells them, "Listen, there's no reason for you to travel with me. God himself has raised his fist against me." And the reason why she's telling him this is she sees God as against her. And she's like, anybody that goes along with me is going to be within the blast zone of God's vengeance against me. So if you want to protect yourself, if you want a good future, if you want a light at the end of the tunnel, this is what you should do. You should turn around and go back to your homeland, go back to your parents' house, go back to your people, and go back to your gods. I find that wildly interesting. Naomi, the one who is, since she was born, been raised to know Yahweh, Creator God, the one who created it all. In the moment of despair, she turns her daughters-in-law attention back to their own people and their own gods, saying, your false gods are going to provide more for you than my God will. Why? Because he's raised his fist against me. And in fact, she gets back to her homeland and she rolls into town, and the town's kind of anxious. Seems like they're excited, but it's not the kind of excited like, woohoo, let's throw a party. It's more like, whoa, is that Naomi? What's she doing back? I thought she moved away to Moab. Where's her husband? Where are her children? Like, how come she's here with just another gal? Like, what is going on? And they ask, is this Naomi? And Naomi means pleasant or sweet. But Naomi's heart has grown bitter. And this is what she says, do not call me Naomi, rather call me Mara, which means bitter. It means bitter. In fact, there's a place in Israel's history where they've been delivered from Egypt, where they were in slavery, and God rescues his people, and he begins to move them towards the promised land, and they get to this place where they're all thirsty. Can you imagine 1 million people that are absolutely thirsty? And they show up to this place to get water, but they taste the water, and the water's bitter, so they call that place Mara. Like, God, you rescued us out of that, but then you brought us to this place so we could just die here in the wilderness. You see the tie that Naomi had to that other story when she walks into town and they say, is this Naomi, the sweet, pleasant gal that we knew from way back when? And she says, don't you dare call me Naomi. My life is neither sweet and I am not pleasant. Rather, call me Mara. Why? Because bitterness had taken hold. Bitterness had settled into her heart. But then, at the end of chapter 2, all of a sudden, we see this incredible shift. The shift is subtle at first, but then it gains momentum as it works its way through the text. But here's the interesting thing is her circumstances had not changed yet. She was still a widow. Ruth was still her daughter-in-law. They were still having to glean behind people in a field in order to get sustenance for the day. What had changed? Like, her circumstances hadn't changed, but something definitely had shifted. Something had changed. What had changed? Well, it's clear her Redeemer has now entered the story. The one who had not only the resources, but the desire to change their position, to come and bring rescue to them. And what I want to do with the rest of our time here this morning is I want to look at 3 observations that reveal how hope begins to return in the midst of hardship. Just 3 observations that I see from Naomi's response here to the generosity of Boaz, and as switches begin to flip in her mind as she begins to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then that's when hope begins to show up. And this is why I want to point out these observations, is that each of us in here might find encouragement in this text. That you'd find encouragement for your own circumstance. Maybe you'll find some tools in this text that are going to help you walk through whatever you're walking through currently or whatever you're going to walk through in the future. And also, I want to point out the observations so that each one of us are reminded here this morning that we too need a Redeemer. We need somebody to show up in our life to do the very thing that we can't do ourselves. We each need a Redeemer. And for some of you this morning, salvation is on the line for you in the Redeemer. Eternity is in the balance because you're in need of a Redeemer, because you've never surrendered your heart and your life to Jesus. Jesus is our ultimate Redeemer. All of this story of Ruth is meant to point us forward toward Jesus so that we can see him as our ultimate redeemer. So as I work my way through these three observations, if you're here and you've not yet surrendered your heart to Jesus, I want you to process this through this reality that you are in need of a redeemer, and his name is Jesus. And I think you're here this morning not by accident, but on purpose, so that you would recognize your need for a redeemer. First observation that I make as I worked my way through this text is Naomi responds with genuine excitement. She responds with genuine excitement. Where did you gather all this grain? Where did you work? And then out of nowhere, may the Lord bless the one who has helped you. Naomi at this point doesn't know who has helped Ruth. She doesn't know whose field she ended up in. All she sees is this big old jackpot of grain, and she gets all sorts of excited. Have you ever been starving? And all of a sudden, there's a big old plate of food in front of you, or you waltz your way into an all-you-can-eat restaurant, and all of a sudden, you're like, whoa, it's exciting. I feel like that's what she's seeing. She's finally seeing, oh man, we can get our head above water. We can finally catch our breath. We have sustenance in order to sustain us. She gets all excited. What's interesting is that this is the first time that we see Naomi speaking with any sort of energy in her voice. It's the first time it seems like she has a glimmer of hope. All of the other interactions leading up to this point, she's melancholy or worse. And then all of a sudden, there's a little upbeat to her voice. Why? Because I think she got a glimpse of the light at the end of the tunnel. You know that feeling, don't you? When your positive response to something catches you off guard. When you're walking through a season that's incredibly difficult, challenging. Most of your day is marked by feeling low. And all of a sudden somebody says something, you get a phone call, and you respond with a genuine laugh. You're like, where'd that come from? You respond with there's a genuine feeling of I think we might make it. And it catches you off guard. You know that feeling? That's the feeling that Naomi is feeling in this moment, right? I think when she bursts out, where did you gather all this grain? Where did you work? May the Lord bless whoever did this to you. And she probably spit all of that out, and then she's like, whoa, where did that come from? That's not been my heart. That's not been my feeling. That's not been my emotion as of late. I've been depressed, I've been down, I've feeling like God has forgotten me, and then there's this genuine moment of excitement. And it reminds me that even if you're still in the tunnel, you're allowed to experience genuine joy when some light breaks through. I know I've been in seasons where they were particularly challenging, and to have a moment where I felt a little bit of relief, I felt a genuine smile, I laughed, and it actually felt like a real laugh and not a forced laugh, and then kind of gathered that back up and that's not the moment I should be in right now. But what if, when the light breaks through, we give ourselves over to the positive emotion of that moment and just say, God, thank you so much. I know I'm not out of this tunnel yet. I know everything that I want to happen has not been accomplished yet. I'm still in the midst, generally in the darkness, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. What would it look like if we just let ourselves feel that moment? See, I think it's moments like that that then create momentum, and all of a sudden hope begins to return. When we just feel the genuine emotion of the moment when light breaks in. So Naomi, she responds with genuine excitement. And that genuine excitement then moves her to acknowledge God's kindness. Naomi acknowledges God's kindness in the moment. And then she repeats, this is what she says, may the Lord bless him. In the NIV, it says it like this, may the Lord bless him. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. The ESV says it like this, may he be blessed by the Lord whose kindness has continued for both the living and the dead. You see, it's interesting in the NLT, which we primarily read here. I think it's one of the most accessible translations, easy to understand. That's why we use it regularly. You read through that part, and it's hard to determine, is Naomi talking about God or is Naomi talking about Boaz when she talks about his kindness has never stopped? The ESV, I think, picks it up best. The reality is in the Hebrew, it's pretty neutral. It's hard to know which one it is. Some theologians say the author did that on purpose to point to both Boaz and to God. But just the structure of the sentence and then what she says afterwards, this man, he is one of our kinsman redeemers. I think the best translation, the most accurate, is in this moment, Naomi is seeing the kindness of God that has never stopped. I want you to check that, like grab a hold of that. The same Naomi that said, God has raised his fist against me. You can't trust my God. You should go back and trust your own gods. But in this moment, all of a sudden, it's like the veil begins to lift. The clouds begin to part. All of a sudden, the muddy water begins to settle, and she can begin to see clearly what she could not see before. The kindness of God has never stopped. He has never stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. What an incredible moment that must have been for Naomi. Like, she doesn't credit this moment for good luck or coincidence. She accurately names the source Yahweh God. He's the one who's provided. He is the one that is taking care of us. In fact, I couldn't see it before, but I see it now. He's been taking care of us all the way through. His providence, his sovereignty, he has this all under control. See, the God that she thought had withdrawn, in this moment, she recognizes is still acting on their behalf. And how many of us have been through a season where it seems as though God is nowhere to be found? We read our Bible, they feel like words on a page. We say prayers, they're like words that bounce off the wall. And the question is, God, are you even hearing me? Are you even doing anything right now? Where are you at? I'm certain that's what Naomi has felt in this time. So you're familiar with her position. You're familiar with her perspective. And then there's this moment where the veil lifts and I'm like, God, you've been working all the way through. I remember this season of my life, incredibly challenging time with some people that I love dearly. And for a year and a half, almost every day, I would grab a cup of coffee, I'd sit in my chair where I read my Bible, and I'd sit there and I'd say, God, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know how to forgive. I don't know how to love again these people. Like, what are you doing here? And then I would say, but I give myself to you, and whatever you want to do in my heart and my life, I'm yours. Would you just do something? A year and a half. And then I got a phone call of some tragic news that came to their family. And the first feeling I had was empathy. It shocked me. I was like, whoa, where'd you come from? I didn't think I could feel empathy for them at all. I didn't know I had the capability. In fact, the truth is I didn't. But in that moment, I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. And I recognized that God had been working on my behalf behind the scenes. And that God had been shifting and shaping and molding my heart to a place of love and forgiveness that I could have never gotten to on my own. This God that seemed distant, this God that seemed absent, this God that didn't seem like he was hearing any of those prayers, he was shaping and molding me from the inside out. is the kindness of God. He was still acting on my behalf. Sometimes recognizing the kindness of God is just the glimpse of hope that you need to keep moving forward. Recognizing the kindness of God in ordinary moments of your everyday life might be the only thing that you need to keep moving forward. Recognizing and acknowledging the kindness of God. So Naomi, she responds with genuine excitement. She acknowledges God's kindness. Then Naomi recognizes the Redeemer. She recognizes the Redeemer. This is what she says. That man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers. This is the turning point for Naomi. Naomi connects Ruth's ordinary day with the sovereignty of God and his extraordinary provision that is found in the law. This is a declaration. It's like this is the light bulb moment for her. She's like, oh my, Boaz? He's one of our family redeemers. Now, we don't get that language because we don't have that provision in our law. But this is the moment where all of a sudden what God had established a long time ago becomes personal for Naomi. She's like, this is why God established this in his law. You can read about it, Leviticus chapter 25. I encourage you to do that today. Have you ever had a rule that maybe your parents set up or somebody set up that didn't make sense in the moment, but all of a sudden you get to a place and you're like, oh, this is why they said that. This is why they wanted me to do that. This is why they established that rule or that law. Now it makes total sense. I didn't understand 25-mile-an-hour speed limits through neighborhoods until I had kids. And I was like, oh, I get it now. Totally makes sense. And God had established this law of kinsman redeemer way back when he established Israel as a nation. And he did it on purpose, for a purpose, to take care of people like Naomi in this exact spot, in this exact moment. And all of a sudden she's like, Boaz, wait a minute, he's one of our closest family redeemers. This is blowing my mind. This is why God established this all the way back then. You see, a kinsman redeemer had a very specific place in Israel's history and Israel's, in the way they operated as a society. The kinsman redeemer could redeem property, could redeem people, and could redeem widows, which is people also, but it's a separate category. And this is what it looked like. Let's say you had a piece of property and God told Israel, all the property is mine. It's just on loan to you. So therefore, if somebody gets in a hard place and they have to sell you their land, every 50 years, that land goes back to the family. It's called the year of Jubilee. But if you can imagine, let's say there's 49 years left before the year of Jubilee comes and you're 35 years old. In those days, that property is gone forever. Unless you have a kid, and then at the year of Jubilee, your kid would take over the property in the land. And this is where the kinsman redeemer steps in. So let's say you were poor and you needed some help, and you recognize I didn't have crops for the last 3 years. I can't continue to support my family, but what I could do is I could sell my property to somebody. I could gain some money. And if you're early on in life, you could wait out until the year of Jubilee. But if you're later on in life, then you could kiss that property goodbye unless you had a kinsman redeemer, somebody close to you who would come along who has the desire and the means to pay off your property and give it back to you. Pretty awesome. Kinsman redeemer. Providing something that you don't have on your own to return something that God has given you. It's a beautiful picture. Also, maybe you've already sold your land and you're still on hard times and you're having a hard time making ends meet and you can't support your family. What you could do is you could sell yourself into slavery, or as a bondservant, you go to work for somebody else for a period of time until the year of Jubilee. At the year of Jubilee, anybody who is a slave, they now are free and they get to just go on with life. If you sell yourself as a bondservant or a slave, then you have to work for them until the year of Jubilee, unless you have a kinsman redeemer, somebody who comes along and says, I will pay to get you out of slavery. I will pay to get you out of being a bondservant. And then you can go free and be on your own. And all of a sudden, in this moment, Naomi recognizes Boaz. He's a man who is a family redeemer. He might be the rescuer we've been looking for in the family redeemer. See, in this story, hope doesn't return because the problem is solved. Hope returns because Naomi recognizes that God has already provided a way. He already has it taken care of. And it's easy in the midst of a very challenging, trying time to not see that God has already provided a way forward for his people. He's already provided a way forward. And again, as I said, at the top of this thing, Boaz is always supposed to point us forward to Jesus, our kinsman redeemer, the one who showed up and paid our penalty, who got us out of slavery. This is what the Bible says, that we were slaves to sin. Not only could we not like break free from it, but we enjoyed doing it. Sin was just our normal mode of operation, and we enjoyed it. Why? Because we are slaves to sin. But Jesus, when he came as our Redeemer, purchased us, bought us out of slavery so that we could live in union with him. Rescue comes through a Redeemer. And like Naomi, we wander through seasons of darkness, searching for relief and rescue in a lot of things. Like we search for it in all sorts of things. We search for it in relationships. We search for it in promotions. We search for it in bank accounts. Like we search for relief and rescue from a lot of different areas. But true hope, like the hope that doesn't disappoint, the hope that we can hold on to no matter what comes our way, the hope that steadies us in the midst of the storm, the hope that anchors us in the midst of chaos. Like true hope doesn't come from what we happen to stumble upon. It comes when we recognize our Redeemer God and that he has already provided for us. He's already taken care of all of our needs. That Redeemer for us is Jesus. So we are going to walk through some dark seasons, no doubt. But the light is real. And when we get a glimmer of the light at the end of the tunnel, when we see Jesus finally for who he is, like the light, Jesus, because Jesus is our Redeemer, we have hope at the end of the tunnel. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Jesus entered our story to come and pay our penalty so that we could have life in him. I got two takeaways, and then we're going to stand to our feet, we're going to pray, and we're going to be out of here. First takeaway is this: let God's promises shape your hope, not your circumstances. Let God's promises shape your hope, not your circumstances. And for some of you, you're like, I don't even know what God's promises are. And that's where I'd encourage you to begin to read the Bible on a regular basis. Anchor yourself in the hope that's found in the scriptures. These are God's promises. Familiarize yourself with them because you need them when you're walking through circumstances and they don't feel hopeful. Number two, learn to recognize God's provision in ordinary moments of life. In ordinary moments, learn to recognize, learn to acknowledge, and then learn to thank God for the regular, everyday provisions that he brings to you. A warm house, food on the table, a job to go to, relationships to be engaged in. Like all of those are very simple things. Recognize those as God's kindness towards you. God's provision in your everyday moments. Would you stand to your feet as we close in prayer? Jesus, thanks for today. Thanks for your word. It's challenging. All of us find ourselves at different times and seasons like Naomi. But God, I pray that you would help us to experience genuine joy in the midst of it. Help us to acknowledge the kindness that you show us. And most importantly, God, I pray that you would continue to point us to Jesus, our Redeemer, who paid it all for us. For anybody that's here this morning and they haven't yet surrendered their heart and life to you, I pray that they would today. I pray that they would make a decision, that they'd have a conversation with whoever brought them, have a conversation in the lobby, or just reach out and begin to pursue you, Lord. That they would surrender their heart and life to you. We pray these things in your precious name, Jesus. Amen. One quick thing before you go. If you're here and you're wrestling with the next step in following Jesus,